Hello, hello, and welcome back. This is Cornelius Fichtner from pmprepcast.com, and this lesson we are going to decompose the work breakdown structure. Here is our lesson overview, relatively straightforward. We'll start with a definition. In fact, we'll start with multiple definitions. Then we'll get into a WBS example with planning and work packages and control accounts and everything. And then before we get to the takeaways, we're also going to be touching upon the WBS dictionary and the 100% rule. So we're starting with the definitions. First of all, here are two definitions from the APM, the Association for Project Management. On the left-hand side, the breakdown structure, not the work breakdown structure, the breakdown structure. That is a hierarchical structure by which project elements are decomposed. And then on the right, the APM says that the work breakdown structure defines the total work to be undertaken and provides a structure for all control systems. It allows a project or program to be divided by level into discrete groups for programming, cost planning, and control purposes. As always, very academic here from the APM. Let's take a look at what Smartsheet has to say about that. It is a comprehensive hierarchical model of the deliverables constituting the scope of a project. It details everything a project team is supposed to deliver and achieve. A work breakdown structure categorizes all project elements or work packages into a set of groups and may be used to form cost estimates. And on the right-hand side, projectmanagement.com, it's a deliverable-oriented grouping of project elements that organizes and defines the total work scope of the project, each descending level representing an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. I think you kind of get where this is going, right? But not quite sure. Let's get you to an example here. But to give you that example, I want to first go back to the APM's definition of what a breakdown structure is. Remember, it's a hierarchical structure by which project elements are decomposed. And here, two words are important: hierarchical and decomposed. Hierarchical means that there is a relationship between each component of the WBS, and it is often depicted and shown as a hierarchy, kind of like an organizational chart from the company that you work for. CEO at the top and everybody below that. And decomposed means that if I just told you to go and build an airplane, you probably wouldn't know where to get started. We need to break down this airplane project into many separate packages of work, and that process is called decomposition. Well then, let's build that airplane by breaking it down into its components. We start the WBS by writing down the end product at the top, in this case, an airplane. And this top level item is called level 0. This usually identifies your project. Then, moving on to the next step, where we can see the hierarchy and decomposition already. To design our new, albeit very oversimplified airliner, we need to have people managing the work, that's us. We need to design the fuselage, and we need to design the empennage, which is the tail. Breaking the airplane into these three parts, that is called decomposition. We also need to design engines, wings, landing gear, and a few key components, but we use these three here to assemble our airplane. The diagram shows how the four boxes relate, and that relationship is obviously our hierarchy. And then each box in the hierarchy is called a work breakdown structure component, or WBS component. The decomposition continues by breaking each of these components down further. In our example here, the fuselage is broken down into the flight deck, passenger cabin, and freight area. However, you cannot really tell someone, here, build the passenger cabin. It's still way too big. You must go deeper. But before we do that, this level here, where the passenger cabin is, could be the level at which you want to track and ensure proper progress and that the costs are controlled. If so, then this would be called a planning package, and it would also have an account code. And this will then enable you to say the passenger cabin is 76% complete and it is 5% under budget. At this point, a little bit more theory because we need to understand the planning package. This is a work breakdown structure component below the control account with known work content, but without detailed schedule activities. We know what a work breakdown structure component is here, part one of this, but what is the other term here? What is the control account that we're talking about? I have a definition for you as well here. A control account defines what work is to be performed, who will perform it, and who is to pay for it. Control accounts are the focal point for the integration of scope, cost, and schedule. Although control accounts are often associated with the earned value method, most organizations simply use a control account to track costs and components of a project. Yeah, and since the passenger cabin is such an important part of the aircraft, we will probably decide that this needs to be a planning package. This makes sense because it takes different set of skills than it takes for building other areas of the aircraft. And these reasons, they make it a sensible and logical place to track the planning and cost on the passenger cabin. In other words, it becomes our planning package. Then an account code would be assigned, and an account code can refer to more than one planning package. It all depends on your organization's needs and the type of the project. Planning packages, though, are still at much too high a level to assign someone to do work on them. There still needs to be more decomposition of the work to get down to a set of activities that constitute a work package. And for that, we are going to take our example down one more level. Here you go, your team just decomposed the passenger cabin into the overhead bins, the seats, and the carpet. And these might be small and granular enough to be able to hand them over to a group to work on. And this means that we have now arrived at the lowest level in our WBS. And these three here at the lowest level, they are called work packages. It's not until you get to a point where you can reasonably go and tell someone, for instance, please work on the overhead bins, that you have finally broken the project down well enough to say that I'm done with decomposing here of my project. For this example, we now assume that this level of decomposition is enough, and the overhead bins, the seats, and the carpets, those are our work packages. Another definition here, because the concept of a work package is important, we make sure that it's properly defined. So a work package is a discrete element of project scope at the lowest level of each branch of the work breakdown structure. Collectively, the work packages specify all the work and products included in the project. With that definition out of the way, we're returning to our previous image. And remember, we have the overhead bins, seats, and carpets there at the bottom. Let me highlight them. These are our work packages. We have made the assumption for our example, this is low enough to create a work package. However, let's talk about the seats. which is the work package there in the bottom center. There are about a dozen seat configurations in a plane, and each seat has a couple of hundred functional requirements. The seating experts can tell us if this is actually low enough, or whether we need to decompose the project more, say into safety, electronics, ergonomics, fixtures, and the like. If that is the case, then 222 seats may be considered just another planning package that we are going to need to decompose even further. Right, so I hear you say, okay, I understand what work packages are there. They're at the bottom, but what good are they anyway, and what do we do with them? Well, in the context of the work breakdown structure, work refers to the products or deliverables from a set of activities, not the activities themselves. So work in this case is kind of like a work of art. The seats are our work output. And the idea is that once we get going with developing a schedule, we will break down our work packages even further. To be precise, we are going to break them down into activities and tasks. And those tasks are eventually what you see listed in the project schedule. So, to summarize, on the left, we create work packages while we plan and develop the scope of our project. And then on the right, we break these work packages down into activities and tasks when we plan and develop our schedule. So it is quite normal to show the WBS graphically as in our airplane example, but it doesn't have to be. It can just as well be in a table format. Each line of the table would then represent one component of the work breakdown structure. To make it easier to see which level each component belongs to, we use a numbering system, and that is called the code of accounts. 0, for instance, would be at the top, 1 would be one level down, 1.1 would be the next level down, and so on. This number, by the way, should not be confused with account codes from bookkeeping. But what about all these details here? There are plenty of requirements that define color, shape, and size. How do we know who is accountable? Where do you define who the responsible group is? When do we need to deliver this? And if your company has stringent accounting practices, you probably also need to have control accounts where all the cost accumulates for this or one particular work package here in our table. Well, all this data, all this detail is kept in the WBS dictionary. This WBS dictionary contains the detailed information for every single WBS component of your scope. For example, it can describe who is assigned to a particular work package, along with any target delivery milestones. It includes the technical information about the work package, the person who is accountable, and the people or groups responsible for the package. And of course, it also has a detailed description of the work that needs to be performed as part of the work package. The WBS and the WBS dictionary, they go a long way in defining how your project work will run. In fact, the table format for a WBS helps with tracking all this WBS dictionary data. We can take the table format and add a few, probably many more columns and start adding all that information, all that data right there. Here we go. For instance, here we have added 2 more columns for the accountable person and the responsible group. You could add columns for all the other data as well and just fill it in as you go along and more information becomes available. Obviously, we are not going to be just adding arbitrary data. We will, of course, only add those additional items that are needed to describe the work package, including any of these here: schedule milestones, quality requirements, technical references, and your WBS dictionary could contain more, depending on what your project team needs to know in order to get the work completed correctly. And all of this, the creation of the WBS, then decomposing it down into the work packages and creating the WBS dictionary to add all this minute detail, supports an important design principle for work breakdown structures, which is called, you could have guessed it, the 100% rule. It's quite obvious here with the picture on the screen. At its core, the 100% rule states that the work breakdown structure should include 100% of the work that is defined by the project scope and capture all deliverables, internal, external, interim deliverables, in terms of the work that has to be completed. As we have learned, the WBS is a hierarchical structure. At the top, we have the project as a whole, and as we move down, we divide it into smaller, more manageable parts, ensuring that each part contributes to the total project scope. Now, when we say full project capture, it means that the 100% rule ensures that the WBS covers all project tasks, outcomes, and deliverables. It's like a safety net, making sure we haven't missed anything vital. Detailed leveling is crucial in the WBS. Each lower level represents an increasingly more detailed definition of the project work, and the 100% rule applies to each of these levels, ensuring that the sum of the lower level components equals the deliverables above. The 100% rule brings immense value to project management because it assists in achieving comprehensive project planning, allocating resources efficiently, tracking progress, and controlling our project scope. And then lastly, applying the 100% rule helps us in precisely defining and accounting for project costs. It ensures that the project's financial plan is complete and transparent, which is crucial for managing large budgets and forecasting future project cost. And that's really it for the work breakdown structure. But allow me to go back to something we touched upon briefly. The fact that we go from work packages in the WBS to activities and tasks in the schedule. Let's flesh this out a bit more and add some context. So, we have the work breakdown structure with its work packages, and to go from here to a project schedule is a two-step process. First, we have to decompose the work packages into an activity list with its activities and activity attributes, and then second, we can use that activity list to create our schedule with tasks and their appropriate start and finish dates. Right now, I want to talk about the activity list. We'll discuss the schedule in a different lesson. For the activity list, here is my own very simple definition. An activity list is a document that includes all activities in a project. Here is a simple example for you. We have an activity ID, a description that uses a verb, lease, design, purchase, deliver, and so on. Who is responsible for this, and when each activity is supposed to start and end, and how long it takes. And we can also see any dependencies between these activities on the far right, which one has to start before which one, or which one has to end before the other one can start. And here is how you get to this list. To create the activity list, we use the WBS as a framework where we further decompose each of the work packages and ask, what do we actually need to do to complete all these deliverables in the work package. In this way, we create a complete activity list where we identify all the activities required and document the dependencies and constraints that affect the scheduled activities. As you might guess, this approach is primarily used with the work and activities for a predictive project so that we produce a reliable basis for subsequent processes involving sequencing, estimating, and scheduling all the activities on the list. And at this point, after more than 20 minutes of talking about creating the WBS, decomposing it, creating the activity list, and all of that, I would not hold it against you if your head is spinning and you're thinking that I'm kidding you. Why would we first create the WBS, then break it further down to create a simple list of activities? Next, we add the activity attributes of all sorts. Then we finally can put these into a sequence so that we have our schedule. I mean, come on! Wouldn't it make much more sense to simply use integrated software and put all of this data into one place? Yes, of course it would. You are absolutely correct. In this day and age, we all use integrated project management software where the work breakdown structure packages and accounts, the activity list, the attributes, sequencing, scheduling, they're all handled in one software. Just like this example that you see here on the right, where you can see a portion of the tasks that me and my team go through whenever a new episode of the Project Management Podcast is ready to be published. But even if you are using an integrated software, you are still going through very similar or even the same processes of defining your scope as a WBS, breaking it down into activities, assigning attributes for sequencing and scheduling. But because you have everything in one place, you can do it all in a very short time. You don't think of this as separate activities. It seems like it's all the same process, but when you break it down and you look at it, you actually go through the steps that I have outlined. You may be doing this top-down, starting with your highest level work breakdown structure component, or you may already know that a particular team or a particular person is responsible for task X in December, so you'll put this in as a scheduled task at the very, very lowest level, and then you work backward from there toward your work package. But in the end, everything, your scope, WBS component activities, attributes, and assigned tasks from the schedule, they will be interlinked and they form a hierarchical structure. And now I have 4 takeaways for you. First, the WBS. This is a hierarchical structure of our project's work that subdivides the project scope into smaller, more manageable components, with each lower level in the WBS representing an increasingly more detailed definition of our product. And at the lowest level, at the very bottom, we find our work packages. Second, the WBS dictionary, which simply contains the details of each WBS component, which could include color, size, description, any required data, or other important information that your organization and your project team needs in order to do the work to complete that particular package. Third, we have the 100% rule, which states that the WBS and the WBS dictionary must define 100% of the work that is to be done on the project. And finally, in order to be able to convert the WBS from a work and deliverable-oriented focus into a schedule, you need to decompose it again and create all the activities and their attributes that are required in order to actually produce and deliver the work. Yes, and that concludes our lesson on the work breakdown structure. Until next time.